Good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to see all of you here in West Bethany, and also giving greetings to folks that are watching in your homes all around campus. I'm Chaplain Ann Weaver, and this is my husband, Todd Weaver, and we are going to be sharing for about an hour this afternoon about some of the history that Landis Homes has with the country of Tanzania and East Africa, and also about our recent trip to Tanzania. So it'll be a little bit of history and a lot of our experience there. We are going to start with a song, and you have been given a half sheet of paper when you walked in. So it's to the tune of "For God So Loved Us." And we will sing the first verse in English. Most of you have that memorized. It's not on your paper, but you're going to sing it with us in English. And then we're going to go into Swahili. If you know it, sing loudly. If you don't know it well, sing medium. No, just sing. It's a wonderful language. Just sound it out and sing with joy.
So the words, of course, are, "For God so loved us, he sent the Savior. For God so loved us and loves me too. Love so unending, I'll sing thy praises. God loves his children, loves even me. For God so loved us, he sent the Savior. For God so loved us and loves me too. Love so unending, I'll sing thy praises. God loves his children, loves even me. Mungu nipendo, apenda watu. Mungu nipendo, anipenda. Sikilizeni furaha yangu. Mungu nipendo, anipenda. Nalipotea katika dhambi, nikawa mtumwa wa shetani. Sikilizeni furaha yangu. Mungu nipendo, anipenda. Akaja Yesu kunikomboa, yeye kanipa kuwa huru. Sikilizeni furaha yangu. Mungu nipendo, anipenda. Sababu hii namtumikia, namsifu yeye siku zote. Sikilizeni furaha yangu. Mungu nipendo, anipenda.
So for some of you, that was bringing back memories, and if you've been around in the global church, you'll notice that some of the songs that we know in English, the tune is taken to another land, and then of course their language is inserted. So that's always a fun experience when you can hear a tune you know with words that you don't yet know.
I'm what you call, I guess, a third culture kid, meaning I'm somewhere between this culture and the culture that I grew up in, which is Tanzania. And so we were there in the late 60s and into the 70s. My father, Richard Weaver, was a surgeon at Shirati KMT Hospital, which is the Kanisa Menonita Tanzania, the Church of Shirati Hospital. So it was associated with the church. Mom taught in the nursing school.
And this is the flag of Tanzania. And this is the president of Tanzania, President Samia Suluhu Hassan. And when we arrived late in the night, we saw all of these big black vehicles streaming to the airport. And we wondered, who's the famous person that's arriving at the airport in Arusha, same time we're landing? Well, it was the president. She was there, a member of her party, her cabinet had died, and there was a big funeral that they were getting ready for. So we probably saw 60 big SUVs making their way to and from. And I really recommend this movie, this Tanzania, The Royal Tour. If you can find your way to YouTube and you can type in Tanzania, The Royal Tour, and it's about a 55-minute movie about Tanzania, and she is the host of the movie, and it will give you a bigger flavor of Tanzania. Just highly recommend it. And here is the country of Tanzania. I don't want to assume that everybody knows where this country is located. This picture first, the continent of Africa, and then let your eyes go over to the east coast, which is the right side of a map, and then about halfway down, somewhat near the equator, is Tanzania. And to its north is Kenya and Uganda, and then to its west is Rwanda and Burundi, and a little bit of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then south is Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. And a couple weeks ago, I gave a TV devotional about this tree of life that's sitting here on the table that was made by some Mozambique refugees who made their way into Tanzania when there was civil war. So it gives you a sense of how many neighbors Tanzania has. But it's a really peaceful country and is getting along with its neighbors as well as the neighbors within its borders. And just a couple of fun facts. Well, first let me show you where we were. If you can see Lake Victoria, the big body of water in the north of this slide, in the north of Tanzania, you might be able to see two little white dots on Lake Victoria. The one that's closest to the top is Musoma. And then you would just drive another 45 minutes on bumpy roads to get to Sharati. And that's the hometown, and that's what we'll talk a lot about later on. So just a couple other fun facts. Tanzania is actually bigger than the state of Texas. I couldn't believe it when I read that, but it is a big, big country. Africa is a huge continent. And so there's no way to visit all of Tanzania in I don't know how much Grace Schenk or Dan Wenger got around, but it's a big, big place. There are over 120 different tribes in this country, 63 million people. 63% of the nation identify as Christian, and 34% identify as Muslim. And then there's a lot of 1% of lots of other religions. And the government has been set up very intentionally to say we represent all the people. All religions are welcome. We won't choose one. You choose for yourself which God you serve, and we get along with each other as neighbors. I think that's probably why there's a lot of peace in that part of the world. And for our age group, you might be interested in knowing that their life expectancy is age 70. So they do not live as long as folks here at Landis Homes. Now, to kind of bring in, how did Mennonites get to Tanzania? How did this all happen? So in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were multiple ecumenical church mission conferences where the Lutherans and the Presbyterians and all of them would get together and say, we sense that it's time to take the gospel and with greater effort to Africa and Asia. And they, rightly or wrongly, I'm not judging, they divided up places. And then even within countries, they'd say, okay, Lutherans, you go here, and Presbyterians, you go there. And the Mennonites got in a little late, okay? They started praying in 1888. They started praying, God, will you open this door for Mennonites to go to Africa? And finally, in 1933, God seemed to answer their prayers and say, yes, it's time for you folks to go on the mission field abroad as well. And so Elam and Elizabeth Stauffer and John and Ruth Moseman were the two couples that were selected. So they sold their farms. They sold everything. I mean, just imagine. Elam gets on a boat with Ori Miller, who was a very, what do you call Ori Miller? He went everywhere around the world in the name of Jesus, trying to find out how we can help. And so Ori Miller and Elam Stauffer took this 3-month boat ride and landed in Dar es Salaam, the coast of Tanzania. And there happened to be a missionary conference going on at that time for the different mission groups that were in Tanzania. So they invited themselves to this meeting, and they said, what's left? And they said, well, there's this Lake Victoria, this lake district, north and west, and there's lots of different tribes, so that means lots of different languages and lots of mosquitoes. And Elam and Ori said, great, we're going. And so they sent word back to the mission board, send Elizabeth, Elam's wife, and the Mosemans, because it takes 3 months to travel. So word got back. And then Elam and Ori took the train across the country and landed on the shore of Lake Victoria. And they met up with a Mennonite who was there, not with a Mennonite organization that didn't exist yet, but he and his wife were already there for 27 years. And he said, we were hoping that somebody would come to serve this part. And so Elam and Emil Sawaka rode their bikes. I read also they did take the truck a little bit, a boat a little bit, walked a little bit, 200 miles. And they landed on the hillside, just 2 miles off of Lake Victoria. And there they met with a gentleman, I want to get his name right because I didn't memorize this part yet. Chief Nyatega. He met with them. What is your business here? And they said, we would like to start a mission. And he said, we would like a mission. They had heard about others and that missionaries would bring the gospel, but they would bring schools, and they would bring medicine, and they would bring other tangible things that the people of Tanzania needed. And he said, you are welcome. And so, other details to the story, but I love this part of the story. When it was time for Elizabeth and the Mosemans to leave Lancaster County, I'm going to get this right, 475 Mennonites from Lancaster County took the train up to New York City to the port to pray and sing and send them off. So raise your hand if your parents or grandparents or whatever were one of those people that went up to New York City to see off these first missionaries. Yeah. So there's about a dozen of you in here, and that is part of the legacy. That's 90 years seems a long time ago, but it's not when we invoke the memory of our parents and grandparents. It's just yesterday. So I think the other part of the story I want to just mention is the date. Elam Stauffer arrived in Sherati on February 14, 1934. And Todd and I and his sister Beth left JFK on February 14, 2024. So 90 years to the day, we started our journey when he finished his journey. And we didn't do it on purpose. I think the Spirit found some joy in that coincidence. So it's been a 90-year journey. I don't know the numbers of how many Landis Homes residents have been missionaries in Tanzania. We're trying to find that out, but it's a lot. It's a lot of people that have gone to this place. And then this tree is still, let me go back. The tree that's in this picture is the tree that's in this picture. So 90 years later, I hugged that tree. It's just amazing that it is still there, and the church is built right next to it. And I think David Schenk was baptized under this tree and some others. And just my own personal connection, when I was reading all the books that Clara Landis got for me from our library about Sherati, discovered that my great-great aunt is Dr. Lily Schenk Kaufman, the first doctor that had been in Sherati around 1934. And this is Dan Wenger. Isn't he cute? He gave me permission to share this. But it's just so special. Like, I thought this was Todd's story, about his family, and I show up in this story. And probably most importantly, I just encourage you to read this book about Marwa Zedekiah Kisari. He is just an amazing man, one of the first to be baptized in Sherati, and became, their pastor and the first bishop in Sherati, and just a dear, dear man, and his legacy continues, and we met many of his relatives. And when he would come to America, he would stay in Chaplain Rhonda Good's house. Her parents had a big old farmhouse and opened it up to Bishop and Susanna Kisari to stay with them. So just lots of special connections, but read this book in our library.
There have been a couple ways, other than by water, to enter Sherati. Obviously, by car, by road is the most common, but I happen to be one of those people that was able to fly into Sherati on a number of occasions when the airstrip was still open. You're not able to fly now, so we had to drive by car overland. So we actually took this airplane and flew into an airstrip as close as we could get, which was still a 3-hour drive away. I've often said that one of the most beautiful scenes is banking the airplane over Lake Victoria, and you're able to see the entire sprawling Sherati on the Katuru Hill. It's a beautiful sight. This is the road into Sherati. I did manage to get a picture for Verl of the road that you might end up on in a couple months. I hope it's finished because it was pretty rough. So this road is waiting for you. We had to keep crossing it, and basically you're on a goat path. Not the road in, the final road in, but you're likely to end up on this road. It was pretty rough, and got the full-on Tanzania experience. Some of the new homes that are being built, a lot of building right now. Shocking to me after 40 years since I had been there to see the amount of building. And we were there during banana harvest season and had a lot of bananas to eat. This is the house where we were the first time. My earliest memories, we lived at two places for our 2 terms. Does anyone recognize this house who may have lived there? Of course, you would recognize it. Yes, you would recognize it. Grace would recognize it too. A lot's changed. Some things haven't changed, and the house does not look all that different. Although we did have more plantings around the foundation, we even had a monkey at one point, a pet monkey that when we'd run around the house would jump out and scare us. And then this is the back side of the house where we grew up. On the right side is a stone where my sister fell off and broke her arm. Although if she were here, there's still some debate. She says something about me pushing her off. That's continued as an argument in our family. And I was telling Grace that it was on the back porch that you can see there that I remember as a child sitting and watching the funeral procession for Alta Shank. When you grow up in Tanzania, the missionaries become your aunts and uncles. And it just so happened that Clyde and Alta were at the age where we called them Grandma and Grandpa Shank. So it was a very powerful memory for me, even though I was young, when Grandma and Grandpa Shank came and stayed with us, and then Grandma Shank got on the small plane and inbound to Nairobi Wilson Airport in low cloud cover, hit the mountain, and then Dad, after one of his surgical procedures, confirmed on the ham radio that she had passed away in the accident, and came home to our place to tell Clyde, Grandpa Clyde. And so I would have been there on the sofa with him. Mom remembers him wanting to sit with us. But then watching her funeral procession then sometime later. Of course, the thread of God weaves its way through these stories, because it happened that a number of decades before, Dan Wenger's father also passed away in Tanzania from an illness and was buried in Mugango. And the story then picks up with my dad in high school, who becomes very good friends with Dan. Then Dad goes to Eastern Mennonite College at the time, learns to know David and Joe, and becomes a roommate of Joe. And then, of course, when we went back to Africa the second time, Dan's mother now is married to Clyde, and so she becomes Grandma Shank. And then we moved back to the States. Well, actually, we went to Roslyn with Karen. Roslyn is a school in Kenya, a boarding school. Yeah, thank you. And so we go to school with the Shank grandchildren, with Joe and Edie's, Joyce and Diane and Rosie, and then David and Grace's, Karen, Doris, Jonathan, and Tim. Then we come back to the States. We go to Lancaster Mennonite with now Wenger grandchildren, Dan's children, Heidi and Danny. And then my sister and I go on to Eastern Mennonite University, and we're with them all again. So it weaves its way, this story of God, isn't it? What does the Lord require? That we do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Tree that we used to play on at the end of the drive. This is our second house, next to where Glenn and Ellen Brubaker lived. And in between the homes, this was our house, both of those buildings. And then off to the left, in between the houses, there was a story one day where I happened to, the only time, find a black mamba, which is a poisonous snake in East Africa, an elapsid, and actually went inside and got my rungu. This is what the young boys carried, and killed it. And I remember Odongo, our cook, being very upset about the fact that there was a snake. Mom actually wrote it down on the handle. But very upset that one would get so close to our house, as you can imagine. And Anne could imagine.
No, please don't.
Because she was praying the entire time we were in Africa that we wouldn't see a snake. Of course, I was looking everywhere I could to find a snake. So now Anne doesn't leave the house without this. This home is where my parents lived on the right when they went back in '84 with my sisters, and Verl lived on the left side. And we should mention at this point with Verl that Elam Stauffer bookends with Verl the mission, because Verl would have been the last missionary in Sharati, and he lived on the left side. This was where Mary and Elizabeth lived on the right. Mary and Elizabeth Harnish, who lived here at Landis Homes. Did any of you live in this house? Verl? This was next door to our first house, so I have pleasant memories in there. This was where the Pfeiffers lived, would have been cousins of ours at the same time, which also would have been the Crable's house. Anyone here live in this house? Okay. This is a new house that was built recently by one of the descendants of the Kasaris, the Bishop Kasari, and this is where we stayed. It was a very nice place. When we arrived, only 20 minutes in Sharati, still woozy from travel, we went over to the hospital and found out there was a 90th celebration going on, and celebrating the retirement of Samuel Ogoyo, right? You recognize him, Verl does, who ended up being a childhood friend of mine. And Anne took this picture at the exact time where we were putting it together, talking about what we had done. And it was very special. We walked in and were escorted to 3 seats up front next to some of the dignitaries from the area. And the medical director came over and said, "Wouldn't you give a welcome, a greeting, and could you do it in Swahili?"
And he did.
I did. I was fortunate. I actually had some Swahili at Roslyn Academy in Nairobi when I had been there. So fortunately, some of that came back. I'm not entirely sure of all I said. I know they weren't. Again, making connections with friends, people we had known. And this is the entrance to the hospital, which is still the same as when we were there as children, where Dad operated. The leprosarium, it's quite a addition of buildings and innovation. And they're doing things that aren't seen in other areas of Tanzania. Our driver kept saying, muttering to himself, "Well, no other hospital in Tanzania does that," or "no other hospital does that," because of their attention to taking care of patients. So they're still a viable, well-run hospital. And Verl, is this the nursing school on the left? Yes.
Yeah,
So Verl would know that very well. And they use soybean mixture with peanuts to make a high protein food to feed children who are malnourished. And that's where Dad spent a lot of time, where I watched him a couple times. And this is the new dental suite that's being built, my interest. It's the old church that we used to go to on Sunday evenings with leprosy patients. It was called the Leprosy Church. And of course, we have known that it's not a disease that you can catch, that these people can be touched, and you can sit next to them.
And I'll just mention that Sharati Hospital, it's a 150-bed hospital. I mean, it's for real. And they are delivering babies and doing surgeries and HIV clinics, and just amazing medical work is happening. and it's by the Tanzanians. So I think the missionaries came, they worked alongside, and they released it back to the people of Tanzania, and they are excelling in their skills. So now we transition to Sunday. That was Saturday when we went to the hospital with the big festivities, and oh, it was so fun. Then Sunday morning was church, and everything seems to be 3 hours long. And so we arrive. I was told to come early because Verl Rufenacht had arranged for me to preach that morning. And, clearly it's like the most significant sermon I've ever prepared and given. Just what do I say? This is a 90-year relationship. And we are there on the 90th and 4-day anniversary. And there was a lot of humility, like, what is it that I can share? And I really felt the Spirit's guidance toward Acts 10. And I did 2 devotionals here about Cornelius and Peter and how a Gentile and a Jew were both transformed. They both had a new understanding of God's central message, which is God shows no partiality. And so I took that with me, but I was nervous. I was grateful you were praying. I had people say, I will pray during that church service. Tell me the time difference so that I can be praying exactly during then. So I had confidence, but it was humbling and exciting. So we meet, I forget, 8:30 in the morning, and then Pastor John Ojala greets us and ushers Todd and I to a back room. And here is Todd's childhood friend again, Samuel, the same one that was being honored the night before at the hospital. He's the deacon, and he's the worship leader that morning. And so it's a little less scary. We have a friend, And we spent some time talking about the service and what I could expect. And I gave gifts to Pastor John. Both Wes Newswanger and Richard Weaver made the holding crosses, those little wooden crosses. So we had, I think I had about 50. And I handed half of them to the pastor and half of them to the medical director at the hospital. But we gave these medical crosses as a gift from our church, from this body. And they were really grateful for that. And so then we go, that's the back side of the church. Oh, and outside of the church is this big monument to Bishop Elam Stauffer. And it says, who entered Sherati 1934. And this is just right outside the church. So the memory of the missionaries is always right there. And I have another picture that has the children sitting on this after the service. I didn't put that in the slide, but I was like, that's just so special that Elam will be remembered forever. And then this is the gravestones for Bishop and Susanna Kasari, the first pastors and bishops. This is what it looks like inside. It was packed, and they just seemed to keep coming and squeezing in tighter. Children, adults, older adults, and often children sitting on children's laps. And I heard one child cry like a baby, and one child threw up after Bible memory. And that was it. Never heard another squawk from any child, and they did not have their little iPads or coloring books, not even those little, what were those little dolls, those little Yes. Nothing to entertain them other than the church service. So I was very impressed with that. And this is Bishop Samuel. And before I went, I invited people who lived in Sharati or were born in Sharati to write a greeting. How did Sharati impact them? And so there were about 8 or 10 people from Landis Homes that wrote greetings, and then I put it onto a document front and back. And before the church service in this little back room, I show it to Samuel, tell him what it is. I said, you don't need to read it all in the service today, it's a lot. And he put it in his Bible. And then when it got to this time in the service, he asked the congregation, do you want to hear these thoughts? And, I don't know what he's saying, but I hear the congregation nod, yes, yes, yes. So he read every word. He read all of your greetings, and they were so grateful to know how your lives were changed from living there and that you cared enough to write a note of greeting to them. And so I give you greetings back. This is how they give greetings. Yes, they just really, really wave with their whole bodies. So they do send their greetings. And then another time, Todd and Beth were called forward to give greetings to the church, and they both spoke Swahili, and there was a lot of joy and love expressed back and forth. Now, we're going to show you a video. There's different choirs. So this is the older women choir. And I think because of time, this is a hymn that we would recognize the tune, but to Swahili words, but I think I'm going to skip it for time. This you need to see. These are the young people. This is their version of worship. And just a little taste, Pastor John Ojala loves children and is spending a lot of time on children. So this is a Bible memory. They each share Bible verses by memory. Oops. Wait a minute. Oh, maybe this, it's a picture. It's not a video. Oh, he was so cute. So it was very impressive to see how much time this pastor, who has another full-time job at the hospital, is giving to children. Then it was my turn. I had been sitting on a red throne for about, an hour by this point. They have, honestly, it's this big red chair. My feet were dangling, at least 6 inches yet till they hit the floor. But it was a long wait, and then finally it's time. And Pastor John translated. So sentence by sentence, I would say a sentence and he would say it back. And my favorite moment was when we got to the part of Acts 10. I'm just going through the story, like retelling this story. And we get to the part and I say, and God shows no partiality. And John looks at me. I thought, oh no, the main point of the story, and there's not a Swahili word. And I paused and I said, God loves everyone. Yes, he says. And then that became the theme. That's the phrase that we kept repeating. And that's the feedback that the people of the church gave to John to come and say to us, thank you. Thank you for telling us that God loves everyone, no exceptions. We're not better than them. They're not better than us. God loves everyone. It was really, well, you can tell, moving. Just a few more snippets. And then afterward, they usher whoever was involved in the service, walks out the center aisle like we would here, and then we have a line. And every single child, adult, older adult, funnels through that line and shakes your hands. And then afterward, some of these women, they just kept hugging and hugging. And I'll let you talk about the woman in the middle.
Right. Yeah, they ate Ann up. And the woman in the center of the three with the yellow is Grace O'Keefe, and so she had a son, has a son, Glenn, not living in the area, who would have been my age, an acquaintance of mine. And her husband, Jeremiah, was Dad's anesthetist for all the years he was at the hospital. Dear, dear people. She sent so many greetings to my parents, just kept saying over and over, you must take greetings.
Yeah. So again, that span of time, you know, how does 40 years go by since Todd was there, and yet there are these people that he knew or people that knew our people. A couple more greetings afterward. And then this is in the evening, we had like all Sunday afternoon and evening guests were coming, unannounced, you know, like just showing up and talking. It was really wonderful.
This is down at Lake Victoria. We were always told as children not to get in the lake because of the disease. And then my 80-something-year-old father said before we left, and don't get in the lake. So here's my picture of the lake, and I didn't get in. Beth may have, but
No.
she put her hands in, I think. So we transitioned, and as we found out, it was really sad to leave. And I knew Ann would cry as we were driving out, but it really felt like we needed more time. But maybe that's good, too, to feel that. So we left then for a week, going through the animal parks. And that was quite a great time of reflecting back to what we had experienced in Sharati, and now seeing the beauty of the animals. And you can see we were there during the end of the rainy season, and it got bad enough that first day. You can see the baby hanging on underneath.
We got stuck a lot.
Right, and the one night, it was so bad that we had to be rescued that first night. And of course, that's a nice thing to be able to take your wife new to this land, and you get stuck at dusk with lions around, and the car can't move. You can see the rain coming in, and we hadn't gotten to, and it was a tent we were staying in, so that's the other thing. I'm taking my wife to this tent to sleep overnight in the rain, and we get stuck. And that's where we got stuck. And I was pretty happy. I was running a fever. We were stuck, and we were going to go sleep in a tent. It was just like my childhood. And it did make me recall with the roads in Tanzania how bad they can be. And in 1984, I had the opportunity to drive some missionaries around to some of the mission outposts and clinics that they would have known from when they were there. These were older missionaries, and almost in their 80s, maybe one of them was. Malin Hess was one of them. He was writing this book at the time. And Grace Stauffer was along. She had been married to Elam, his second wife. His first wife, Elizabeth, passed away in Uganda, but is buried in that same graveyard at our house. Oh, she's not buried there?
She's buried in Uganda.
She's buried in Uganda. And so we, Simeon Hurst was along, and then Jay and Lois Garber, representing Lancaster Mennonite Conference. So we did this loop, and the roads were tough. And I was 19, and we were bouncing around. And Malin Hess was writing this book, and he was lecturing the whole day. It was like you'd press the play button. Malin was smart, and he was talking, and he was standing up most of the time. And I remember hitting a bump, and it was so much of a surprise to me. Malin happened to be standing up, talking about things, and the first thing I saw in the rear view was Malin going up, and I saw his arms and legs dangling from the ceiling, and then gravity took over, and I saw him whoosh by my mirror again to reveal Grace Stauffer in the back seat, laughing hysterically. And I don't know if any of you knew her, but her eyes would go into little lines when she'd smile and laugh. She was laughing. Well, then Malin started to lecture me about my driving and, keeping my eyes on the road made Grace laugh even harder. And then he turned around to her and was upset that he could have been hurt. Oh, she screamed. She laughed. That did it. She was out of control laughing. It was the most wonderful thing I've seen. Before long, he's laughing. I'm laughing. Simeon's laughing. In fact, we were all laughing at Grace, who was laughing at Malin. So those are the African roads. So this is that first night. We were stuck, and they came out and rescued us. Brought another Land Cruiser out. But that's as it was getting dark on the savannah. This one I think Ann took.
Yeah,
right. And he wasn't happy. So fortunately, there's a little bank in front of him, but he had charged right up to the edge. This is Olduvai Gorge, where they had the Leakeys, starting in the 40s, 30s, had started excavating artifacts, and a place that gave me interest in head, neck anatomy, and probably led to my interest in dentistry eventually, especially surgery. So we spent a day at that dig. It's somewhat active at this point. This is looking down into Olduvai Gorge. And this is now, I think this is back in the Serengeti. You can see what we were getting into. The water actually had come up over the hood a couple times. And this one, if you look at the windows in the sides, you could put your hand out almost like in a boat and touch the water. These were some lions that we came across in Ngorongoro Crater.
This is just right outside our window. This is not a zoom. This is 5 feet away. They were using the hedgerow as a pillow. There were 3 male lions with their heads down.
This is the one I showed my kids when I got back, and I said, just think of this picture here. That lion is your dad keeping an eye on you. That lion was not very comfortable with us being there. So these were not taken with a telephoto lens, so we were pretty close. And this one, I think, would have come through the window if we would have given her the opportunity. But they were really beautiful. The one kill that they had of this buffalo was right next to the road, so we were able to see it. And the lioness that you can see there was very concerned about the circling vultures overhead. I didn't think she needed to be too worried. She's a lion. But nothing can prepare you for this. Yeah. I mean, the baby lions that came out then to eat were the cutest. The hyenas, and of course now we know that they're not the scavengers we thought. Probably over half of their kills are actually their own, not from a lion kill. Quite interesting. A lot of impala, and we were happened to see like some challenge. The one harem that the one buck had was being challenged. It was kind of fun to watch. This group of young males coming after him. This is in Ngorongoro Crater now, and it's a sunken volcano, and probably Anne's favorite place. So all the pictures, of course, are now not, they're flat savanna, but yet you have these rising mountains in the background. You can see it just along the edge. You know, the zebras were so beautiful. There's a Cory bustard, a bird that could probably cause some damage. He was not very scared of us.
And we were fed well everywhere we went. We always had a special little picnic packed by whoever we were staying with. And that's Beth. And just this Tree of Life sculpture, this is the Mozambique man. His family moved during the war, and they were letting Todd carve one of these trees of life. And we bought this lion painting. And then just a glimpse of some of the places we stayed. This was in Arusha the first 2 nights, ate outside. This is the tent. So don't worry, I was not in just some little tent sleeping on the dirt. I was actually on a bed inside a tent. They even had a commode and a shower in the back of these tents. And then this was at Ngorongoro Crater. So we really did experience lots of beauty. I want to read you a blessing that Todd's sister Beth wrote. And if there's any time after that, we can ask for some questions if you have any. But this is a blessing that Beth wrote. May your spirit be always a little homeless, a little filled with longing for other places. Keep open spaces to be filled with song and dance and laughter. Keep rooms and parts of you awake to welcome other hearts and wisdom, other stories to start you daily on the path to wholeness. May your roots go deep wherever you go. May you flower and fruit and feel the power of the one who made you coursing through your branches, ordering your growth, flowing into every part of you. May you, like the elephant, put your trunk to earth, listen to the ground, to hear the sound of spirit, calling you to follow where the spirit calls. May your inner life be teeming like the Serengeti grasses, be as vast within your hidden places as the sky that spreads above you. May you love the wildness in you, for that wildness is the spirit too. May you, like the hills and mountains, raise your hopeful heart in praise. May joy fill up your days, and may your presence raise the hopes of all who long for hope to hold you. May you boldly shine your colors, feel the sun upon your feathers, feel your wings carry you high. Know the sky will hold you. Do the thing that you must do. May you make your heart into a nest, and these are weaver nests. The birds are called weavers. A blessed circle of protection, a space of grace and safety to nurture the young birds we send into the future. for wandering souls who pause to make a home in every space they enter will find themselves finally centered. Will know that wherever they roam, they carry with them a little bit of home. So I wonder, Kathy has a microphone she can bring to you. We have just a couple minutes. Does anybody have a question or a story or an observation?
That photo that you showed of the inside of the church, when I was baptized there, it was a thatch roof. But when Kervin Buchan was there, he and his fellow Nevin Crable oversaw the taking away the thatch and putting up the tin roof. Right, Kervin?
Yeah.
I was wondering how many were in Africa when the 1W boys were there. Nevin Crable and I guess, were the last two. No, I guess.
No?
Yeah. Anyway, Dr. Lester Eshelman was there when we were there. How many remember him being there? Anybody? I was there from 56 to 59, and Lester Eshelman was ready to go home. He said, I don't want to take you 1W boys out for a hunting trip yet before we go home. And he said, I don't think there's any lion in Mara Valley. That I never saw any. Anyway, we killed a zebra, drug it to our tent, and got awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was 2 male lions outside eating at the zebra.
Oh, wow.
And that was a night of waiting. And then after a bit, the female lions came and were eating too. How many remember that story of Nevin Crable and the lion story with Dr. Lester Eshelman?
Thanks, Kervin.
You showed us the hospital and the interior of it, but what were the homes like? Because some of the insides of where you stayed showed some very modern things, but generally, what were their homes like? And was there hunger as well that you noticed in the hospitals and things, as you keep hearing?
Yeah, I think there is a conversion from the traditional mud and wattle kind of house with the thatched roof. Still a lot, but there's also, I think, a push for these new homes with tin roofs, and there is some malnutrition, and we did see some in the hospital. That was hard to see. That ward where they were trying to hyperaliment and get these children back to health. And then, of course, just down the hall, you've got this beautiful maternity ward where we went in, and there's a mother nursing her new baby. And then Dr. Sharangi, the medical director, said, come over to the bed. And she pulled back the covers, and there were 2 more.
Yeah, they say that at the hospital, 80% of the patients would be at poverty level. But I don't know what that means. I don't know what is poverty in Tanzania. It's hard enough to know what poverty is here in the United States. So we saw a range, but we really didn't get into homes inside them. We saw the outside.
So what is the situation right now with the solar power and getting water from the lake up to the city by this time?
Yeah, that's always been the big thing, right? Yeah. Like Chris Pfeiffer and Hershey Lehman were there how many years ago in the 50s, putting in the new pipeline. The whole idea is to get water from down at the lake up to the hill where the hospital and the compound is. And so now they have this solar-powered pump and a new storage unit for the water. and it's working very well. And then also a new power system that's the solar power system for the hospital. And we got in to see the batteries that they store energy. Huge room, needs to be air conditioned to keep the batteries cool. And Glenn Brubaker would have been very instrumental in that technology.
Okay, we'll take one more and then we will close our time.
Hi, I'm Ann Good. I was very surprised to see the picture of Dr. Lily Shank because I grew up knowing about Dr. Lily Shank. She was my mother's cousin, and she visited in our home, and we all admired this Dr. Lily Shank.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to hear about her.
Well, I'll want to hear more from you, Anne, about what you know. So thank you for telling me. Well, thank you, every single one of you who came today or watching on WLH. I mean, this was supposed to be just 3 people going to Tanzania because Todd and Beth had a need to return to their childhood home, and I had a need to see it after hearing about this for almost 4 decades. And the ripple is so much bigger. I see that it has stimulated those of you who have been missionaries around the world or have had family members as missionaries. You remember praying for missionaries, sending things over for missionaries. Just seems to have stimulated a lot of memories for others. And so I'm really grateful. And I believe that, it won't be our last trip to Tanzania, and maybe some good folks will come for a visit here sometime as well. So it's a to be continued, even though we'll end this broadcast now. So praise be to God.